With me is Ron Cooke, and you may wonder who's Ron Cooke. Well, Ron Cooke has got his name on this book called From Low Gear to Overdrive, and From Low Gear to Overdrive Volume 2, From Low Gear to Overdrive Volume 3, and the latest one, Volume 4, which is the one we're going to be talking about. And that's all down to you. And we're in Taumarunui, and that's a place where native logs came from, and the timber industry in general. I remember we went way out the back there, Ron, to look at some bush trams. There was tunnels way out the back there that don't exist anymore.
Yeah, that's the Taumarunui District sawmills.
Yes.
At Waitui.
That's it,
yeah.
That's the one. But I'm just saying, back in the day, all those things were operational, and you know, the timber was coming and timber was going, and everybody had a job.
Yeah, yeah. Communities were all self-supporting, you know.
That's right. So this latest one, this is the Overdrive. Here we go, volume number 4. I've turned to the first page, and let's have a look and see what we've got. A football team. And that's another thing that happened, you know, everybody's got a job, they all got young fellas, and let's do the footy. It's the shifting houses on the fantastic trailers they have these days.
Yeah.
And then we come to the evolution of logging trucks.
Yes.
The evolution of logging trucks, and there's a native log on there with a chain around it, on very small skinny tyres.
Yes.
And as we sort of come into this book, we've got the logging trucks of the time, 1920, early 30s?
Yeah, 1920s. They're not in order of when they were invented or whatever, but they're just showing. I couldn't nail down who was the first to have a particular setup on their truck, but it wasn't important. It was more important to show the evolution of it.
Sure. Now there's a bloke here who's got an international, K International, his arm's out the window, and he's leaning on the door. He's got a beret that sort of sits on the back of his head. Underneath that shirt he's probably wearing a bush singlet, you know, the old black singlet, and a pair of heavy boots. And I see there's one here with the door off.
I think there's another one over the page.
With the door off? Yeah, there he is.
Yeah.
And was there a particular reason in that time that you would have the door off? Only apart from it's as hot as hell.
Yeah, that was the main reason. Right,
so not going down a hill and you start to lose it. If you lost it,
the heat that's generated from the motor, especially the dragging along at 1 mile an hour with a full load.
But as I say, when he's coming down the hills, and those brakes aren't all that wonderful on those things in that time. And right, you know, if he's losing it, the truck's lost the brakes, he's gone, he can actually jump out without having to...
Well, most of them sort of stuck to it.
Oh, did they?
There's a couple who jumped out. One guy jumped out and broke both legs.
Oh.
And John Mariner, who was a former Maori All Black, he had to run into a swamp to avoid going across the bridge at right angles to the road. It's a zigzag bridge, as they built them in those days.
So he chose the swamp rather than the bridge.
He chose the swamp, and he's very, very lucky that he wasn't killed, because there's photos in the first book showing the log sitting over the cab, just beside where his head was.
Oh.
He was so lucky, just no idea.
And a few shows ago, Ron, we looked at this comma, and it had a drum on the back exactly like this one is, and that's full of water.
Yes.
And they're sort of dropping water onto the brakes.
Yeah.
That was a popular thing in this area at that time?
Well, it was invented late 1940. I haven't really established, and I talk about it a lot in this book. We haven't found out who was first to do it, but a lot of them claim they were first.
Oh, okay.
But you've got to be careful when people claim things. They're probably correct in the sense that they did something first.
But they didn't know anybody else who did it first.
No, they knew, but they did a particular thing first.
Oh, right.
But the whole invention of water on the brakes, Fatty Atkins reckoned he knew why it was done. A truck had been coming down the Punga, which is where they used it.
Yep.
It was about a 12-mile run with a full load of logs. And they stopped at the Horseshoe Bend up the Punga. People will know where that is. And he got out and he had a leak on the front wheel and all the steam come off, and he thought, God, we should run some water on this and cool it down. That's one theory.
Right.
I don't know whether it's true or not.
No. But my Uncle Harry, who worked over in Minganui, they came up with the same sort of idea.
Yeah.
Water on the brakes. In America, they were doing water on the brakes, and they still do.
Yeah.
Water on the brakes. When we went to America, you might remember in episode 13, we were looking at the fat truck, and that fat truck's going down a hill with you can follow the water following along in the
on the first volume. You can see the water there.
Ah, yes. There we go. Just that photograph there, folks. You can see the water coming from the wheels. Back in
that was
day.
when he just turned the water on the brakes before coming down.
Yeah. Wow. But it's interesting that the water on the brakes and and those old commas. I mean, what were they? Sort of sloper commas, was it? Or was that the TS3?
No, it was before that. Before we move off that subject, can we jump to? That's the best photo that I found. Is the single 44-gallon drum, oil drum. The other ones that we were looking at a few pages back were two 44s welded together.
Oh, right.
So they carry more water. Yeah. But this one is the only one I've found with a single 44-gallon drum on it. But the thing is, the old truckie said that the first experiments were with the drum standing upright. Right. So, but I've never found a photo showing one of those. No. But that photo is that's John Mariner's truck. His story is near the back. It was one of the last stories that I finally put together from all the loose ends. And this photo was amongst the snapshots that the family gave me.
Wow.
And they didn't know the significance of it. And I pulled it out and I thought, good God, look at that.
And that's quite a significant photograph because that truck is a 1949 comma, which was the first one they made in that shape.
Oh, right. So at least we know.
It hasn't got any little side windows at the back.
Oh, right. At least we know that it was the late 1940s.
Yeah.
But we haven't narrowed it down to any smaller than that yet. No. But no, I had to throw a photo that was in there out and put that one in because I couldn't fit it anywhere else.
No. In this photograph, there's a square tank, and I guess things are progressing with the water. They've gone away from 44-gallon drums and they're making the tailor-made tanks that go onto the back of the trucks.
I think Eric Deadman was the first to build a proper tank, and when he talks about being first, he was probably talking about building it properly.
Right. Yep. So we've got these 40s Fords, and that's probably got a flathead V8 in it, which is quite powerful for the time. Yeah. But that's all they've got. I mean, the most powerful truck is this towing that log is probably 15, 16 ton on the back of it. But other guys were using the GMCs. Yeah. The internationals from the war, 1.5 rated trunk, 2.5 ton rated truck. Just. Yeah.
This book sort of revolves a lot around these 1940s
machines.
Fords.
Yes.
They're called jail bar because of the grille.
Yes.
And a sort of semi-theme in the book is jail bars. And you'll see as you go through the book, different uses, like it's even won the local fire engine. But they first came out in 1942, and I think 43, because of the war, they stopped making them. And then when the war was over, 1946 to 1947, 1947 was the last one, and then they were called the Ford Thornton because of the...
they had a 2-speed diff or something in the back.
Yeah, they had a specially designed tandem drive in them.
In this area, did you ever have something called what they called a rubber band drive? So you've got one that's driven by the diff, and then in front of that's a lazy axle and there was a belt that sort of went between the driver and the lazy one to sort of help.
Was the lazy axle in front?
Or behind. In front or behind, it didn't really matter, but they had this belt going through. So it just added a little bit of pull to the, not that it probably didn't do much at all, but it was there, you know.
The thought was there.
Yeah. So it's just like, you know, later on they put a motor in a trailer.
Yes.
To help sort of drive it, but they all turned to
one of those other books there, we've got the guy in Mapu who put a Rolls Royce engine in his trailer, and he was the talking point of the district when he did that. But anyway, I think the thing that spoilt it was the dust that came off the road.
Yeah, that's right.
It was too hard on the engine.
Too hard, yes. And that was the common denominator. I mean, they had those engines and trailers all around the country. Even the breweries had one, but it was the dust that was killing them. But anyway, I'm just saying this, having the door off, going up the Bryn Derwins, talking to some of the old truck drivers in these trucks with a running board like this one. They would stand on the running board with their left boot on the on the accelerator and stand outside for a bit of fresh air and a bit of cool.
There's another photo further up with a guy doing that.
So it was quite a common thing to do, yeah.
Well, they weren't moving very fast either.
No, 2-3 miles an hour. Well, here I am in the cafe, and it's just like going back to 1950. The chairs of the time, Formica I think it's all called, and the black and white floors. There's Elvis Presley over there, there's a jukebox over there, there's memorabilia behind me, that beautiful montage of cars behind me. There's even an old Dodgem. Remember the Dodgems that they used to show? Boom, boom, boom. Wonderful. And I'm having a big breakfast. It's bacon and eggs. And so if you come here with your group to have a look at the museum, you can sit down and have a wonderful meal before you even start. So look at that. Bacon and eggs, sausages, tomatoes, toast, mushrooms, the whole 9 yards. And a cup of tea to wash it all down. So there you go. When you come here, come and have a meal first and then enjoy yourself in the museum. Well, I'm at Fully Equipped, and Fully Equipped is where they make crown canopies. And in 1993 I did an ad, you might remember, where I took a canopy off a ute, put a little outboard motor on it, out and caught a fish or two, and then came back and kicked the door down like a landing ramp, and woohoo! And that just sort of, there's two guys on the beach watching me do it, and I sort of scratched my head, how am I going to get out to those birds? Ah, I know, the canopy. So that worked a real treat. Now we've done another ad. They thought 30 years on it's time to do another one, and which I'll show you in just a minute. But first of all, this is where they make the canopies. It's a huge process they go through. It takes about a week, I think, for one canopy to sort of be completed from woe to go, and they make them of fiberglass. They polish this fiberglass, and it goes right through this whole factory and pops out the other end where they put in the windows, and then when it gets put on a ute, they do that here as well. They make sure everything's all waterproof, and then it's all finished, and the customer drives the ute away. And they've got a few utes stacked up round the back there waiting for their canopies. But one of the problems is the ones that are coming over, the utes that are coming over from overseas, they get held up, and of course production lines here get held up. So this is one of the reasons why there's so many canopies behind me, is just waiting for the utes to come off the boat so they can fit them. So that's pretty much that. But crown canopies, you can do all sorts of things with them, as you know. But keeping your gear dry is one of them. You can go camping in them, of course. You can just sort of chuck a mattress on the back of your ute and have a bit of a snooze while you're four-wheel driving and things like that around the country. Would you like to come and catch a pig with me tomorrow?
Yeah, that sounds great.
Excellent. There's a truck in here called a Thornycroft, and coming up, folks, in our next show is a couple of three Thornycrofts, and they live in Australia, but they're interesting trucks, and the Thornycroft people have been around for many years. I think they started about 1910 or thereabouts, and that's the GMC. You know, I don't think I ever saw one of these with a cab over GMC.
No, we say in the caption there's only one of them came to New Zealand. Was it?
Below that we've got a sort of a long-nosed late 50s Mercedes-Benz with a huge log on the back. Yeah. My Uncle Harry, hello Uncle Harry, who's he bought one of these, and he said to me, and I'm 12 years old, if you can start it, you can drive it. But it came from Germany, and somebody said to him, this is trucks designed for the motorways, you know, the autobahns. It's designed to go fast. So when they took it into the bush, of course it got about a third of the way up and run out of steam. So they brought it back, they chopped the back end out of it, they put a hippo back end in it, a couple of more gearboxes, and it was doing it.
I think that one was the same. When the makers came out and saw what they were used, they said, oh, this wasn't designed to do this sort of work.
No, I think that same thing with the Eaton diff. The guys were complaining about the Eaton diff wasn't doing it, and people came out, God, that wasn't designed to do what you're doing with it. So anyway, we're coming forward, and this is something we saw back in the day. I mean, it just, you know, thousands of sheep on the road, and you had to weave your way through them all. It still happens here and there, but not as often as it used to, you know. I see these a boom here with two scissors, they call those, to plonk the log on the back of a truck.
Yeah, that was just the changeover from native to pine.
Oh, okay. Because I know the bloke, when I worked at the Whakatane board mills, the crane operator down by the siding, he just had one set of scissors that did, you know, not two. He just had, you know, he could swing that logs around.
A balancing act there, wouldn't it?
doing what he did. But it's just amazing. And then you see a bulldozer sort of obviously attached to this, helping to pull it out.
The mud was so thick, the guy told me, that they even had to get a bulldozer to pull them out because the size of the load.
Looks like one hell of a load.
Yeah, 60 foot long.
60 foot? Yeah. My Uncle Harry brought 100 foot out.
Oh, did he?
And there's a photograph with his guy truck, and this thing's going along a bush road. It's enormous. They put two logs on it to start off with, so to try and keep the end of the log off the road. But you see him, how the hell he ever got that round some of those, you know, hairpin bends? I've no idea.
Well, they used to do that in those days. It wasn't a big deal.
No.
You know, it was when the bureaucrats came along, wasn't it?
This is too dangerous.
And, invented safety reasons that weren't there.
So we're doing this for your own good and for your safety.
Yeah.
Okay.
But we're not going to give you some money to make up for what you're going to lose.
No. So more logging, and the logging trucks are getting higher and stronger and more powerful as we're coming forward into the 60s. The Macs and the Pacifics and the Kenworths all arrived. And Mike Lambert from over in the Bay of Plenty, he brought in the V12, the truck they called the Concorde. It was called the Concorde because the digger driver sort of couldn't believe how quick it took for him to take this load to the mount and come back again. He said, God, you're as quick as the Concorde. And that's it got his name. Yeah, it's amazing. Anyway, Snow Brown came back from the war, and with him he brought an international truck. And internationals were, the Navy had international trucks. The Army had GMCs, and not quite sure where Studebaker fitted into all that, but they made a lot of trucks as well. But anyway, Snow Brown with his 1.5 ton international decided to go logging. And he'd come off out of the bush road and onto the main road. He was only going to be on the main road for a couple of 3 miles before he turned off again. Cop pulled him over, weighed him up, and he had 28 tonne on this little truck. And Snow said, you know, the fine, I could buy a house with the fine. He said, but I managed to beat it. So anyway, but this looks very much like that. I mean, they just made a wooden cab or something to keep the sun and the rain off, and beat up, you know, and it just looks exactly like that, like that truck. Well, I've come into the museum now, and just looking around, there's all sorts of cars from the 50s and 60s, 30s. There's a couple of 20s in here even, and it's a magnificent collection. So there's lots and lots of stuff in this museum for you to look at. Lots and lots of stuff that's going to take you right back to the day. And if you're new, well, there's lots of stuff here about New Zealand history. So if you come here, you're coming to Railside Place, which is off Rifle Range Road in Hamilton. Certainly worth a look if you belong to a car club or some sort of a club and you want a place to go. This is the place to come, and you can start off with a meal in the cafe. Come and have a look, enjoy yourselves. I absolutely recommend it. Christmas isn't all that far away. And so if you're looking for a present for the truck driver or somebody interested in transport in your life, then my Talking Trucks book might be just the thing. So if you'd like a copy, just email me, billhohepper@extra.co.nz, and I'll take your details and I'll get a copy in the post to you. Now this book covers trucks basically heading back from about 1972 to the time they started making vehicles. So a good historical book, and tells you all about the New Zealand transport industry up until about 1972. So for a Christmas present, perfect. Email me, billhohepper@extra.co.nz. And then you see the native logs like they had on, you know, back in the day.
Yeah.
Just.
But the reason I put this photo in this, look at that back tyre there.
Looks
right down to the canvas. But they got two really good ones on this side.
Yeah. There's another bloke who was telling me about how many tyres they took into a job. They were just going through tyres one after the other. They took a truckload of tyres in on Monday and brought a truckload of tyres out, you know. But they were called rag tyres, weren't they?
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah, but yes. Anyway, those tyres just didn't last long at all.
But another story is when they were pulling up the tram lines, all the dogs that held down the rails to the sleepers, they just flicked them out, and the trucks came along and were picking them up and
won't pop.
Yeah, there's a little story in there about one of the drivers offering kids so much for every spike they found, right? But the kids were too cunning. They went away in the paddocks and where the tram lines used to be and come back with them all. So you had to cut that off on the head. You know.
Well, that's just a wonderful trip back into history. And we've just finished doing the tramway show with about the commas, and he had a white and various cars. Yeah. That went on the rails, were called bush trams.
Yeah.
And looking at this, it's got a double-ended sort of thing, but it's the same little bogie tracks that went on the rails. Bush trams.
That was the Price locomotive, and it was the first one they ever built.
Oh, okay. Price and Thames.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we just call those ones that were built by Heath Robinson.
Good old Heath.
I think that might be in the caption there somewhere, I'm not sure. I use it every now and again because if it looks like a Mickey Mouse put together thing. And
on the other page here, there's an advert for Ford trucks. So the local people here, did they buy their trucks second hand, or did they go to Auckland and do a deal? Or?
The local agent here was Taumarunui Motors, and they were the Ford agents.
Oh, okay, so they bring the trucks here.
There's a lot of useless information we use. But the thing is, people of that time do relate to it.
Yes.
You know.
And it's history, folks. I mean, you look at all these books, it's all about what's gone before. It's all about the men that worked in these places and the women for that matter.
Yeah.
The camaraderie that went on, the engineering that went on, the Kiwi ingenuity that went on, the things you had to do to get the job done, you just did, you know, and it's all in these volumes. Marvellous. Absolutely marvellous. And I have to say, Ron, an absolute credit to you and your team to assemble all this. What inspired you to start doing this in the first place?
Well, I was producing a magazine called Roll Back the Years. And it was just on local history. And I did the last issue about 1988. And the last issue was to coincide with the first inaugural transport reunion, this one here.
Right.
Road Transport Reunion. And that was the issue that I did, and that was the last issue I did for Roll Back the Years. And once we did that, all the truckies said, look, we better do a book. We want a book done on the transport industry. I said, yeah, okay, I'll do it, if you give me the information. So that's why it took us 20 years, I think, from that issue to the first one that we did.
I mean, you must have spoken to all sorts of people to, you know, get.
That's the old thing in hindsight, isn't it? The old what if, you know, or what I should have done was interviewed him. And this story that we got in here, where we look at this one with Bob Anderson, which was the guy who owned the truck on the cover. He was one of my go-to people.
Oh, okay.
You know, if I wanted to know any engineering things, because he was self-taught engineer, mechanic and all that, and if I wanted to know something about any particular drivers and what trucks they had, I'd go and see Bob. Unfortunately, he died, and I suddenly lost a go-to person, and I realised that what I was thinking was that he was always going to be there.
Yeah.
And they're not.
No.
They're not bulletproof.
No.
You know, sooner or later they pass.
Yes.
And this is the crunch with this latest book, is that I'm running out of go-to people.
Fair enough.
And we have to rely on the next generation, their families.
The sons and the daughters.
To try and remember
what Dad used to do.
Yeah, and more so, things that he said, have they interpreted it right? Is that that's what he meant?
Yes.
You know, because if you come from a different era, different things mean different things.
Yes. If you want to get yourself a good book about the history of New Zealand, and in particular in this Taumarunui area, this is the way to go. And I'm sure if you get a hold of Ron, he'll steer you into the other copies if you haven't already got one, to follow up on it. So, Ron, absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
And if you want one of these, there's Ron's details. You just send him an email and he'll arrange to have one delivered.
Yeah.
That about right?
Yes, exactly.